Welcome back to another devlog. This time we're going to talk about one of the graphics effects that I used on the title screen and which I'm particularly pleased with. If you look inside the gun-sole lettering on the title screen, you'll see a swishy moving pattern which only moves within the boundary of the lettering. How was this done? Black magic? Well, no. It's a simple alpha channel trick, like a cookie cutter coupled with an old school demo effect called a plasma. Never seen one of these before? Well, here's one I found earlier in all its psychedelic glory. It's the colourful wiggly pattern in the background there. This one is pretty severe, so let's take it away and continue on. So, going back to my title screen, at a high level we're doing it in two stages like this. Draw the plasma effect to a texture surface, and then draw the texture surface to the screen, but use the alpha channel on the gun-sole lettering sprite to only allow drawing to the inside of the letters. We've already carefully set our alpha channel in this sprite. Now at this point I was going to say that I took the alpha channel cookie cutter or dynamic mask technique from a game maker tech blog, and I was just going to point you to it. However, it seems it's fairly old and has been taken down by Yo-Yo Games for whatever reason. So I'll split this devlog into two parts. I'll continue with the plasma effect right now in this video, and I'll cover the dynamic alpha mask in the next one. So let's carry on with the plasma effect then. So like I said, we're going to do this by rendering onto a texture surface using a shader. Now, look, I'll apologise at this point for bringing some maths into all this. Don't worry, it's nothing that needs Stephen Hawking levels of maths ability. And if you remember the basics of sine waves from your secondary school or high school maths class, then you'll be fine. So if you remember your sine wave, you remember it looks like this. And our shader code is going to use this to draw the squiggly pattern onto our texture. But let's build up slowly. First, let's just draw a grayscale sine pattern across the texture. Now, I don't mean that we're going to draw this wavy line. The sine wave indicates the brightness of the pixels. So as we move across the screen and the sine wave value increases there, then the pixels will be brighter, and as the sine wave goes down, then the pixels will get darker. But drawing directly to the screen or the video memory is slow with Game Maker, so how are we going to do it and maintain a decent speed? Well, at this point I'm going to have to digress a little onto shaders. Very briefly, a shader is a bit of code that runs on the GPU that sets the colour of each pixel on the target, which in this case is our texture surface. In Game Maker, this is done using GLSL ES code. We actually need two of these shaders, a vertex shader and a fragment shader. And it's this second one, the fragment shader, which sets the colour of the pixel, and that's the one that we need to modify. I'm going to assume that you have a passing familiarity with all this and just continue, but if you're completely confused, then you can pause, go and read the Game Maker Studio manual on shaders to get a primer, and then come back. But I wouldn't worry too much about it, and I just carry on. Okay, back to that sine wave. So if we try this fragment shader code, then we get grey bars running up and down. We're only using x as an input to the sine function here, so that's our x coordinates. So the grey is only going to vary with x, not with y. So when the sine function is at a high point, then we get white. If it's at a low point, we're going to get black and some shade of grey in between as it varies. So let's try that. There we go. That matches our sine value. Increasing to a maximum, then decreasing. When it goes negative, it just gets treated as 0. And obviously, we can do the same with the Y direction. Same thing, just horizontal bars rather than vertical. And of course, we can combine them together to make the line, or the slanted bars, on a slope. or we can add the signs of X and Y separately to create a kind of fringe pattern. Here you can see we're taking sign of X and Y separately as compared to that previous function that made the slanted bars, where X and Y were together within the same sign function. In this case we get this fringe pattern, like so. To create a different effect, we can combine the X and the Y in another way to create a circle. Again, apologies for the maths, but here we're using Pythagoras' theorem. In this case we're using the square roots of the sum of the squares of X and Y to get the distance from the centre of the texture, and we're basing our brightness value on that distance rather than just X and Y. That's what this bit is doing, the square root of the squares of X and Y. It's sticking that in the sine function. So if we play this, we should see a couple of circles. Yeah. Now, let's go back to just varying with X. But now we're going to include a time component. This variable here, time, is being updated once every frame, so once every 1/60th of a second. And if we do this, then we're going to be sort of advancing through our sine function 1/60th of a second at a time. So it should make our bars move to the left. Ta-da! But if we multiply our time factor rather than adding it, so here we're multiplying instead, then it creates a kind of, I don't know, zoom effect, I guess. There we go. Looks like it's zooming in and out. Now, these functions are all very well, but none of them look very kind of plasma-y on their own. However, if we use all the effects at once, then yeah, we get the decent effect. Here, I've just added them all together. So I've included a fringe pattern, some zooming and rotating bars, and some circles moving around. If we play this, yeah, we're starting to get there. That's looking kind of plasma-y. Good enough for me anyway. But it's just grey. And that's because we're computing our sine value in this V variable here. And then we're using V as the inputs for R, G and B for our colour. So that's why we're getting grey. If I use a function for each one of R, G and B instead, so here I'm using this one for R, I'm using 0 for G, and then B is this bit, and on this one at the end is alpha. Then that gives us our final version. Very funky. Takes you back to 1969. I think that brings us to a good place to stop this video. We have a plasma effect rendering to a texture, and that was half of our battle, if you remember. In the next video I'll go into how we can use the alpha mask to constrain the rendering of this texture to just the inside of our gunsole lettering rather than drawing the full square texture on the screen like it is here. Okay, thanks for watching, if indeed you have, and I'll see you in the next one.